Rain hammered the truck stop canopy like a fist on sheet metal. Cole Hart wanted only 10 quiet minutes, a patch of dry pavement, and maybe a bitter cup of coffee. But trouble never needed an invitation. A black sedan burst into the lot, fishtailing across slick asphalt. Wipers clawed at the windshield. The brakes shrieked. The car had not even settled when the rear door flew open. A girl jumped, bare feet skidding, palms grinding against wet gravel, breath ripping itself into one broken cry. Help! She bolted toward the row of bikes, toward the leather and engines, like they were the only solid things in a world tilting beneath her. Rain plastered her clothes to her skin. Her knees buckled twice, but she kept running. Rook froze mid-stride. Tiny slapped the pump shutoff. Bull stepped wide and blocked the clerk's view with his back. The girl slammed into Cole's chest. Her hands clamped onto the front of his cut, shaking so violently the zipper rattled. "Do not make me go back," she gasped. "Please, please." Cole kept his voice steady. "Name, Maya." She looked barely 15 or 16, soaked through, one knee bleeding through torn denim. Her breaths came in small, jagged bursts, like each one carried a memory she was trying to outrun. Rook approached, palms up, medic calm muted by the rain. He touched her elbow gently. She did not pull away. Behind them, the sedan rolled forward and glided to a perfect, deliberate stop. The engine purred like something rehearsed. The driver stepped out, a well-tailored coat, a practiced smile, hair combed with the precision of a man who lived his life in front of cameras. Pastor Matthew Reed, the town's miracle worker in photographs, a regular face in every charity report. "Evening," he said softly. "She is having an episode. I am her youth pastor. I will take her home now." Maya curled deeper behind Cole as if his shadow was the only shelter left. Her fingers dug into his leather as her breath frayed. Cole kept his tone level. "Maya, show me something real, something that tells me you should not get in that car." Her answer was immediate. She lifted her left wrist. Rainwater streamed down skin, marked by raw, paragel grooves. Clean, deep, the unmistakable pattern of plastic ties biting hard. Rook inhaled sharply. "Recent." Maya's phone buzzed in her pocket. The screen lit with a red banner announcing an emergency alert canceled. Her voice cracked. "I did not reach for it. I did not have to." The red glow washed across Reed's face, and for a single flicker the polish fell away. Something colder surfaced. Cole spoke quietly. "We are done." Reed stepped closer, palms open, tone falsely patient. "Son, you know how this looked. Bikers pulling a minor away from her pastor. This reads bad. For you, probably." Rain pooled in dark mirrors across the concrete. A semi wailed past on the highway, spraying dirty water over the pumps. The neon signs buzzed overhead, bright and trembling. Reed extended his hand. "Keys. Her parents will be frantic. God put her in my care. Call them." Maya rasped. "Call my mom, not him." Reed's smile tightened. The shadow behind it sharpened. "I am calling the sheriff," he said. "No?" Cole answered. "I am." He lifted his phone and stepped sideways, just enough to let Reed's sedan block the distant highway camera. Reed noticed. His gaze sharpened. "Glove box," Cole said. "Open it." Reed hesitated. Bull shifted. Reed obeyed. He opened the passenger door and popped the latch, even through the rain haze. Cole saw what he needed to see. A leather wallet with a metal coin inside. A Sheriff's Brotherhood coin, the kind handed down through family. Cole felt the shape of the night change. He dialed a different dispatch. One county over, one not tied to Reed's spotless reputation. "Neutral Uni," Cole said. "Road 9 truck stop. Minor requesting help. Pastor claiming custody. We need outside eyes." Right now, The reply crackled. Understood. 10 minutes. Reed gave a slow, confident nod. 10 minutes is long. Long enough for the right people to make the right calls. The sheriff loves me. The town loves me. You think you can draw a line against that? Cole met his eyes without flinching. We are not holding a line. We are drawing one. Engines began rumbling behind him as the crew read his posture like scripture. Rook guided Maya toward the closest bike. Tiny snapped a poncho over her shoulders. Bull scanned the edges of the lot, every muscle ready for a choice no one wanted to make. Reed did not move toward them. He did not try to chase. He simply lifted his phone and smiled, not at them, at someone listening on the other end. Cole knew that posture, the tilt of the chin, the softness in Reed's voice as he spoke. He whispered something into the phone, not a plea, a command. Rook stiffened, Tiny's jaw locked. Bull muttered low, voice rough as gravel. I have seen that look. Men who do not plan on losing wear it like aftershave. Cole swung onto his bike. Neon flickered in the puddles. The night vibrated with engines and rain and something sharp rising in the distance. Move, he said. The bikes rolled out in formation. Maya tucked safely in the center. The storm swallowed them, engines cutting through the wet dark like iron through cloth. Behind them, Pastor Reed stood under the neon glow, phone still at his ear, expression calm and patient. Whoever he had called was already listening, and whoever they were not law. Cole felt it in his bones as they vanished into the rain. This was no rescue. This was the first breath before the hunt. The van rolled into the self-serve car wash at the edge of the freight yard. Rain hammered the tin roof like gravel tossed by a hard wind. Cole stepped out first. The air inside Bay 3 was cold and hollow, every drip echoing like a slow clock. Tiny flicked on the overhead light. It buzzed, sputtered, then settled into a pale wash that made everything look carved from stone. Rook guided Maya to a stack of folded shop rags near the back wall. She moved stiffly, blanket clutched tight, breath trembling through her teeth. Sit here, he murmured. You are safe. He crouched in front of her, medic eyes locked onto the marks on her wrist. He turned her arm toward the light. The grooves looked even deeper now, darkened and swollen. Rook drew a quiet breath through his teeth. That sound echoed harsher than any curse. Someone pulled these tight on purpose, he said softly. He dabbed gently with a clean cloth, then angled his phone. Shutter clicks bounced off the concrete. Wrist, knee, torn denim, dirt in the lines of her palms. He photographed everything with steady, practiced hands. Across the bay, Tiny rolled the step stool beneath the mounted camera. He tapped the dome with one thick knuckle. Unlocked, he muttered. Figures. Cole looked up sharply. Tiny paused. He glanced toward Maya. You get a vote, he told her. That camera saw you enter. Do you want the footage kept or gone? Her jaw trembled. Rain dripped from her hair. If they use it against me, she whispered. I never go home. Then we take it, Tiny said. He climbed up, popped the dome with a practiced twist, pulled the feed, wiped the last moments, and copied the pieces that mattered. The small drive clicked into his palm like a secret being sealed. Now they have only what we choose, he said. Bull stood at the mouth of the bay, watching the rain outside like it might turn into something worse. The orange yard lamps flickered across his shoulders. Cole knelt beside Maya again. I will need your phone. She handed it over instantly, as if surrendering something heavy. He slipped it into a sealed bag. This number goes to sleep for a while. You will get a new one. Only trusted people will know it. She nodded, hugging the blanket tighter. Cole stepped into the far corner and dialed. The phone rang once. Chains answered with a sigh sharp enough to cut glass. Tell me you did not start a war without telling me. Minor in danger, Cole said in a low voice. Injuries visible. Pastor involved. Local sheriff compromised. We need emergency paperwork out of county, protective order, forensic transport, and we need it now. Chains was silent for a breath. Then he said, "You will have filings in Twin Mesa within the hour. But listen, document everything. Times, places, every injury." And Cole, before he finished, Bull jerked his hand up, a silent signal. Cole froze. Outside, a sweep of pale light rolled across the open bay. The headlights of a cruiser glided past the entrance, slow as a shark circling. Tires hissed on wet pavement. For a long moment, the lights lingered on the concrete lip of Bay 3. Rook held Maya still. Tiny closed his hand over the camera dry. Bull reached for the handle of the van door subtly. Ready, but motionless. Cole lowered his voice to a whisper made of steel. "Proceed," he murmured into the phone. Chains understood without asking. "If that is a deputy, keep your head down. The law loves a show. Do not give them one." The cruiser kept rolling. Its tail lights dissolved into the rain. Only then did anyone breathe. Chains continued. "Now get moving. Neutral ground only. No local hand." And Cole, "Yes. Do not let that pastor anywhere near that girl again. No matter who he calls." The line went dead. Cole pocketed the phone and stepped forward. "We pack. Now." Rook gathered his kit. Tiny zipped the evidence drive into an inner pocket. Bull pulled the van door wider. Maya stood with effort. Rook steadied her, guiding her into the back, where a thermal blanket waited, like a quiet promise. As Cole slid the van door shut, the narrator's voice rose in the cold air. Not loud, but certain, Reed believed he was dealing with criminals who hide in shadows. He thought fear was a weapon he owned, but he misjudged. He had stumbled into men who did not fear the dark, men who weaponized the light, men who built evidence like armor and used truth the way others used blades. The pastor thought he could bury this night. He did not know the night had already begun to bury him. Bull climbed behind the wheel. Rook sat beside Maya. Tiny took the seat opposite, watching the storm outside like it held answers. "Where?" Bull asked. Cole looked out into the rain. "The center." The van eased out of Bay 3 and disappeared into the storm, heading toward the one place Reed could not touch, the one place his influence could not buy, the one place where truth would be written down before anyone could silence it, the place that would decide the rest of this night. The advocacy center glowed like a small island of safety in the storm. Soft gold lights shimmered behind tall windows, promising calm, but carrying a pressure that settled on every step the crew took. Inside, the floors were warm, the walls gentle with pastel murals, but the air held the quiet intensity of a courtroom. A receptionist buzzed them through with a soft nod. Her eyes moved first to Maya, then to Cole, then to Chains, who strode in behind them with the authority of a man who belonged in both alleyway shadows and marble hallways. Chains looked like a blade dressed in courthouse fabric, vest of charcoal gray, sleeves rolled to reveal forearms, etched with the confidence of a man who had survived more than bar exams. A silver pen tucked behind one ear like a hidden weapon. He stepped toward Maya first. "You are safe here," he said. His voice had weight, not volume. It settled her shoulders by the slowest fraction. Then his eyes cut to Cole. "The storm followed you," he murmured, "but the way out is forward." He motioned them down a corridor lined with sealed doors and soft humming lights. The air thickened the farther they walked, until every sound felt amplified. Inside the interview room, Maya sat on a cushioned chair. A chill advocate knelt beside her, slow and patient. Rook hovered at her flank, ready to steady her breath if she faltered. Tiny and Bull stood behind the glass with Chains and Cole. Maya began to speak. Her voice wavered, but each word hit the room like falling stone. "He locked me in that office," she said. He said silence meant healing. Chains did not react yet. He waited. Maya continued, hands clutching the blanket. But that was not the place he used the most. There is a house. Beyond the orchards, an old white house with a broken porch. He calls it the quiet place. The advocate froze. Maya's breath hitched. I heard children there, a girl crying through the vents, a boy kicking something metal. There were scratch marks on the door frame. I saw them when he opened the hall, deep ones, like someone had clawed until they bled. Behind the glass, the crew reacted. Rook shut his eyes and steadied himself with a single exhale. Tiny lowered his head, jaw grinding slow, but Bull moved first. He turned away, planted one hand on the wall, and drove his fist into the concrete. Once, short, brutal. The sound cracked through the room like distant gunfire. The advocate flinched, Maya startled, but Chains did not move at all. He watched Maya with the stillness of a predator, focused entirely on truth. He stepped inside the room when she finished. He knelt in front of her, one knee touching the soft rug. You did not imagine those sounds, he said, and you will not carry them alone. That house you described will not stand by morning. I swear that to you. Maya blinked hard but did not cry. There was too much steel in her fear for tears. Chains rose and turned to the advocate. Document every word. File it under emergency threat. We go through Twin Mesa. No local signatures. The advocate nodded quickly and began typing, hands moving with a nervous precision. Outside the room, Cole watched the faint tremor in Maya's fingers. He felt the old weight settle between his ribs, the one that always came when a child had carried more than any adult should. Tiny stepped forward and offered Chains the small evidence drive, the one pulled in Bay 3. Chains lifted it toward the ceiling lights. The faint glint of metal flashed across the glass window like a signal. Reed thinks he controls the narrative, Chains said. But this is the kind of truth he cannot drown. This is leverage, this is light. He slid the drive into his vest, then turned as the printer in the hallway sputtered to life. The machine spat out a single sheet of warm paper. Chains reached it before the ink settled. He snatched it from the tray and held it not like a document, but like a loaded weapon. This is not paper, he said. His voice filled the corridor. This is a battering ram. Bull straightened. Tiny's eyes sharpened. Rook looked toward Maya as though checking she heard the meaning behind each word. Chains continued. Approved by remote order. Emergency access granted. Twin Mesa officers are already en route to the Orchard House. No local badge will step foot inside that place before them. The advocate stepped out from the room, holding a second verified copy. Everything is in motion, she said. They will reach the house before dawn. Maya pressed the blanket to her chest. Relief trembled through her shoulders, but fear still clung to her like cold smoke. Chains took the warrant, folded it once, and slid it deep into his vest. He turned to Cole. We go next. Reed feels something shifting. He will try to hide what matters most. We move now, or he moves first. Cole nodded. Then we move. Rook guided Maya toward the deeper wing of the center, where secured rooms waited with warm blankets and soft lights. Bull walked ahead of them, shoulders broad enough to block any shadows. Tiny followed last, watching every corner with the tension of a man expecting violence even in quiet places. Chains pushed open the exit door. The storm outside growled like an animal waking. Cole stepped beside him. Rain misted across their coats. Next is the orchard, Chains said. Cole breathed once through his teeth. And the orchard is about to burn. The crew followed him into the storm, boots hitting wet pavement in steady rhythm. Engines began rumbling in the lot as Bull unlocked the van. Somewhere beyond the orchards, children were waiting. Somewhere in the dark, Reed was preparing. The night had already chosen a side, and it was not his. The orchard spread beneath the storm like a drowned world, rows of old apple trees twisted in the wind, their branches black and grasping. Mud swallowed footsteps whole. Rain slashed sideways across the field, thick as thrown gravel. Cole led the crew along a narrow path that cut through the orchard. The mud clung to their boots in heavy clumps. Ahead of them, Twin Mesa officers moved in tight formation, their lights muted beneath dark covers. They moved with the cold efficiency of people who understood how to enter a nightmare without becoming part of it. The orchard house appeared slowly through the sheeted rain, a sagging roof, a porch that leaned as if trying to escape from itself, windows boarded shut from the inside. No light, no sound, only the trembling hint of wind pushing through broken siding. Chains stood beside Cole, rain running off his vest in shining streaks. His sharp eyes scanned the structure. He carried tension like a blade sheathed under cloth. "This is the place," he said quietly. The crew stayed back beneath the trees. They had promised not to interfere. They had no intention of breaking that promise, unless the storm itself demanded it. Twin Mesa approached the house. One officer lifted a breaching ram. Others stacked behind him, rifles angled low but ready. Rain hammered their helmets and gear, turning them into silhouettes carved from stone and steel. The ram swung, wood cracked like a bone, snapping under pressure. A second blow struck, hinges ripped free. The door collapsed inward. The officers surged into the dark, lights slicing through old dust and rotten air. Commands echoed through the house, low and urgent, swallowed by the thunder that rolled overhead. Rook edged forward instinctively. Tiny grabbed his sleeve and held him still. Bull clenched his fists, jaw locked so tight it looked carved from iron. Inside the house, voix rose, clear. Left side, movement. "Stop right there." Cole listened to the chaos, watching the flicker of flashlight beams dart across boarded windows. The orchard wind wailed, threading through the trees like a warning. Then an officer stepped into the doorway, cradling something small. A child. Bare feet, torn shirt, mud up to the ankles, a face pale as moonlight, held too long under water. Rook shut his eyes for a heartbeat. Tiny whispered something dark and low. Bull turned away, shoulders shaking once before he forced stillness back into himself. Another child followed, then another. The orchard house was giving up its ghosts. Chains exhaled slowly, a harsh breath carried away by the storm. His eyes burned with anger he did not allow to erupt. Inside the house, officers continued tearing through the shadows. Furniture overturned, locked cabinets forced open, rusted nails pried loose. Something heavy slid across the floor. Then came the call. We found an object. Twin Mesa gathered around it. Their lights converged on a table at the center of the room. A wooden box rested there, polished by years of touch, carved with swirling patterns that seemed to tremble under the beams. The prayer box. One officer lifted it with careful gloves. Even through the stormlight, it seemed to emit a weight, as if every whispered confession trapped inside had rotted into something poisonous. Tiny breathed out. That thing should never have touched the hands of a man like him. Chains stared at the box with the expression of someone examining a wound cut into the world. "Beg it," he said. His voice was cold stone. The officer sealed it away. More voices echoed deeper in the house. "We have documents. We have binding straps. We have signs of restraint." But there was something else. A heavier silence that settled like smoke. Cole felt it before anyone spoke. The absence of a certain kind of presence. The absence of the man who built this place. An officer approached the doorway, helmet dripping with rain. His expression alone delivered the verdict. No sign of Reed. Chains muttered a curse under his breath. Bull growled something raw. Tiny kicked the mud, sending clumps flying. Reed was gone, and gone clean. But the night was not done. Another shout rose from inside the house. "Sir, we found something else." Officers regrouped at the doorway. One emerged holding a sealed pouch. The object inside glimmered under the flashlight. A laminated badge. Crisp edges. No smudge. No dirt. A visitor pass from the center. The same type worn by staff who worked in the wing where Maya now slept. Chains reached for it. His hand trembled once as he took the pouch, then steadied into a fist of iron. His face lost its color, drained pale in the storm shadows. "This is not just a warning," he whispered. "This means he knows exactly where we took her." The words hung in the air like the pull of a trigger. Cole felt the night shift again. Colder, sharper. Rook swore under his breath. Tiny stared at the badge as if it were a venomous thing. Bull punched the orchard tree behind him, bark splitting under his knuckles. Chains closed his hand tighter around the sealed pouch, rain striking his skin like needles. "Reed left this on purpose," he said. "He is already moving, and he is reaching toward her." Cole stepped forward, boots sinking deep into the mud. "Then we move faster." Chains nodded. His eyes narrowed into something lethal. "We cannot leave her at the center," he said. "Not now. Not when he has eyes on it. Not when he knows how to walk through locked doors without leaving prints." Cole looked toward the dark path leading out of the orchard. "Reed ran tonight," he said, "but he did not run to hide." Chains finished the thought. He ran to strike. Lightning split the sky. Thunder rolled across the trees. Officers guided rescued children into waiting vehicles. The prayer box disappeared into secured hands. The orchard house sagged in defeat, its secrets no longer its own. Cole turned to his crew. "Gather up. We move now." As they stepped back through the orchard, the storm howled behind them, tearing at branches and broken boards. The night was no longer a hunt. It was a countdown. The safe house sat at the edge of a quiet neighborhood, a tired duplex with chipped paint and a sagging porch rail. But the lights were warm, and the air inside smelled of soup and old blankets, and something softer than fear. Bull pushed open the door with one steady hand. A dog somewhere inside let out a half-hearted bark and then settled back into a slow, snoring rhythm. The kind of dog that had seen too much to be startled by footsteps. Maya stepped in first. Her shoes left thin streaks of orchard mud across the entry rug. She froze for a moment, unsure if she was allowed to move. Rook placed a hand on her shoulder. "You are home for the night." The living room was small. A couch sagged in the middle like it carried stories no one wanted to tell. A single lamp glowed from a corner table. Tiny hung his jacket over a broken chair and stepped aside so Maya could see the kitchen. A pot of soup simmered on the stove. Steam curled gently toward the ceiling. The scent of broth and herbs drifted into the air like a memory of better days. Chains rolled up his sleeves and moved to the counter. He ladled the soup into a deep bowl and set it on the table where the light was warmest. "Eat if you can." Maya sat slowly. Her fingers hovered over the bowl, unsure if the warmth belonged to her. Then she lifted the spoon. The first sip made her shoulders tremble. Not from pain, from the shock of something gentle touching her after so much darkness. Rook filled a glass with water and set it beside her. Tiny rummaged for a clean towel. Bull leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching the windows like a sentinel carved from muscle and stormlight. After a few minutes, Maya whispered something the room barely caught. "May I wash up?" Chains nodded. Rook showed her to the small bathroom down the hall. The water hissed through old pipes. The sound of it filled the house with a kind of relief that settled into everyone's bones. When Maya returned, her hair was damp and combed, her face clearer, her eyes no longer trapped in that wide, silent fear. She wore a clean sweatshirt that hung loose around her frame. Cole handed her a notebook, its page blank, its purpose unmistakable. "Write what you remember," he said. "Names, places, roads, anything your mind finds." Maya sat at the small kitchen table again. She held the pen tightly, as if afraid it might bite. Then she began to write, slowly at first, then with the urgency of someone opening a door that had been locked for far too long. Chains watched over her shoulder. Each name she wrote tightened his jaw. Each address she scribbled etched a deeper line into his forehead. Evidence gathering disguised as healing. Healing disguised as truth. Tiny pulled out his phone, not to browse, to monitor. Notifications rolled across the screen like ash. Reed had begun to move. Twin Mesa, statement false. Pastor confirms attack by bikers. Community rally scheduled. Prayers for the lost lamb. Bull growled deep in his chest. "He is poisoning the air," he muttered. Cole leaned over Tiny's shoulder. The posts were polished. Photos cropped to perfection. Reed was feeding the public a version of the night shaped like his smile. Maya looked up from her notebook, her face pale and small. "He is telling them I ran away on purpose." Chains crouched beside her chair. "People can be fooled for a moment," he said, "but truth cuts deeper than lies. And tonight the truth is on your side." Maya swallowed. She returned to her writing. Outside, rain tapped gently against the windows, softer now, more like fingertips than fists. The storm had worn itself out. After a while, Maya stood and moved to the front door. No one told her to. No one guided her. Something inside her pulled her forward. The deadbolt waited above the handle, heavy, simple, the kind of lock no sermon could manipulate. She reached up, her fingers brushed the cold metal. She turned it. A single sound echoed through the duplex. Click. Maya froze. Her breath caught. Her hand hesitated at the halfway point between fear and power. Then she turned the lock the rest of the way. Click. 2 clicks. The sound settled into the house like a heartbeat learning its rhythm again. Bull straightened. Tiny looked away for a moment, as if trying to hide the way it struck him. Rook exhaled softly. Chains pressed his thumb against his chin and nodded once. Cole felt something shift in the air, a thread pulling tight, then releasing, a new truth taking root. Maya stepped back from the door. Her hands shook, but she was not trembling from fear this time. Something steadier moved beneath her ribs. Control. She walked to the couch. Rook unfolded a heavy blanket and draped it over her. She pulled it up to her chin and curled into the cushions like someone testing the shape of safety. The dog wandered in, sniffed her once, then curled at her feet, a quiet protector with tired eyes. Cole dimmed the lamp. Tiny checked the window locks. Bull settled in a chair near the door. Chains reviewed Maya notes one last time before slipping the notebook into his vest. Maya's eyes drifted closed. For the first time in a long stretch of nights, sleep found her without a fight. The blanket warmed her shoulders. The dog breathed softly at her feet. Rain whispered its final lullaby against the windows. And somewhere in the quiet hall, the deadbolt held steady. 2 clicks. The sound of a door that belonged to her at last. The pines rose like dark pillars as the dirt road narrowed into a winding throat of mud and water. The white van ahead fought for control, sliding and jerking its weight across the soaked earth. Its engine roared with a panic that did not belong to a machine but to the man behind the wheel. Bull pushed the crew truck harder. Rook leaned out the window, reading the van movements like a wounded animal's thrash. Tiny crouched in the back seat, rolling his knuckles against his palms, a storm gathering under his skin. Cole kept his gaze forward, steady and sharp as the road tore itself apart beneath them. Chains braced in the back, his voice low and sure. He is carrying more than fear. The truck hit a rise and slammed back down. Mud sprayed in wild arc. The van swerved left, clipping a fallen branch before settling back into the road with a shudder. Cole tapped Bull's shoulder once. Cut left at the fire path. Bull swung the wheel. The truck burst through low branches, scraping bark and pine needles across the windows. The fire path twisted through the trees until it curved back toward the main road. The fleeing van came into view again, lumbering forward like an animal cornered and desperate. Tiny climbed partly out the window, holding the frame, one hand steady in the rushing wind. "Closer," he growled, his voice carried by the cold air. Bull pushed the engine. The truck surged ahead and blocked the road, sliding sideways in front of the van. The van brakes shrieked. Tires carved deep furrows in the mud. The vehicle skidded, then slammed into a rut and came to a violent stop. Before the engine fully died, the driver spilled out the door, stumbling into the mud. He tried to sprint into the trees, but Tiny hit the ground running and crashed into him with full force. They rolled through wet needles and dirt. Tiny grabbed the man collar, spun him and hauled him upright. Then Tiny fist lifted, power and fury ready to break bone. Cole stepped in and caught his wrist in midair. "Not us," he said, his voice cutting through the pines like cold iron. Tiny froze. Rainwater slid down his clenched hand. His breath trembled with the effort of restraint. Slowly he opened his fist and stepped back, shaking with held rage. "Paper first," Cole said. Bull pinned the driver down. Chains and Rook rushed to the van. Cole ripped open the back doors. 3 children huddled in the dim space, clutching each other like small shadows trying to stay alive. Their eyes were wide and vacant, their clothes torn, their breath thin and trembling. Rook climbed into the van and lifted the smallest child into his arms, whispering comfort through the cold air. Chains steadied the others, guiding them toward blankets. Tiny held ready, with surprising gentleness. Tiny then noticed something on the driver's seat, a laminated flyer, spotless and clean. He lifted it carefully. Cole stepped beside him. The page showed Maya smiling, a photo, softened and edited. Beneath it curled soft pastoral word, "Pray for the lost lamb." Chains stared at the flyer. His jaw tightened a fraction. "Reed is not hiding," he said. "He is building a story, and he is using her face to do it." Bull growled deep in his chest. Tiny closed his eyes against the rising heat of anger. Then the driver let out a broken breath. Mud streaked his cheeks. His teeth knocked together. "You do not understand," he whispered. "The pastor is not running away. He is running for office. They are rallying for him right now. He says you stole a child from God." Chain's face went still, the way a battlefield goes silent before a cannon blast. "Get him up," Chain said. Bull dragged the driver to his feet. Rook lifted the rescued children into the truck, wrapping them in warmth. Tiny kept watch at the edge of the trees, scanning the shadows as though expecting Reed to step out of them. Chains folded the flyer and tucked it inside his vest, like poison meant for later. Cole took one last look at the abandoned van sinking deeper into the mud. Then he climbed into the truck and shut the door. Bull started the engine. The truck backed away from the wreckage. Chains held the children close. Rook kept them steady. Tiny stared out the window, his breath fogging the glass. Cole looked toward the pines. The driver was right. The woods were quiet. But back in town, the noise had already started, and it was heading straight for the only door Maya had left. The house at Cedar Grove sat quiet beneath a soft veil of mist, its porch light glowing like a lantern held against the dark. Gravel lined the small lane in uneven patches, reflecting the dim shine of the sky. Inside, Aunt Marlene moved with the practiced calm of someone who had survived storms long before this one. She checked the windows, the back latch, the kitchen curtain, each motion steady as breath. Maya sat curled on the couch, wrapped in a blanket. Miguel, the old dog, lay across her feet, snoring softly. The house held the warm smell of tea and laundry, and something gentler than fear. But the quiet felt too thin, like paper stretched over fire. Aunt Marlene stood at the front door and rested her palm against the wood. She glanced back at Maya and offered a small, careful smile. "You rest, child, I will keep watch." Maya nodded, though tension trembled in her fingers. Outside, the wind shifted. Tires crackled along the gravel. Headlights swept across the living room wall in a long, wavering streak. Aunt Marlene straightened her spine. A car rolled to a slow stop. The engine idled. Then a heavy knock landed on the door. Maya jerked it upright, eyes wide. Aunt Marlene moved quickly. She did not open the door. She unlatched only the chain, letting it hang in place while her hand stayed firm on the deadbolt. A voice on the porch floated through the woods, slick with false kindness. "Evening, ma'am. We received a welfare call about a minor inside. We just need a quick look to be sure she is safe." Maya shook her head hard, clutching the blanket closer. Aunt Marlene kept her voice steady. "Who filed the call?" The man hesitated. "Boots scraping on the boards. Anonymous, ma'am, just doing my duty." Aunt Marlene reached for a folded sheet on the side table. She slid it just far enough through the chain for the porch light to brush the top. "The emergency order. Written clean. Signed clear. This says she stays here," she said, "and I honor the law." Silence. A tense shifting of weight, then the deputy lowered his voice. "Ma'am, there are troubling allegations around this child. People are talking, rumors spreading. Let me inside and we can settle this peacefully." Aunt Marlene leaned her full weight against the door. "No." The deputy voice sharpened. "You refuse, I can call for backup." Aunt Marlene did not blink. "Then call." Wind rattled the gutter. The porch boards creaked under his frustration. For a moment, Maya thought he would ram the door. Then another engine rumbled down the lane. Strong and confident. Headlights cut through the mist with the force of a blade. Trooper Alvarez stepped out, her boots crunching the gravel. Rain slid from the brim of her hat. She stood in the open watching the deputy, with eyes that did not waver. "Evening, trooper," he said, voice cracking. Alvarez crossed her arms without a word. The weight of her silence filled the whole lane. "I was just performing a welfare check." He tried again, but the words wilted in his throat. Alvarez tilted her head slightly, almost imperceptible, but enough to drain the color from the deputy face. He swallowed, stepped back from the door, and back down the steps. "Have a good night, ma'am." He retreated quickly, climbing into his patrol car and rolling away until the taillights vanished into the trees. Only then did Alvarez approach the porch. Her voice carried through the door in a low, steady tone. "He will not return tonight. But the town is loud. Ma'am, stay ready." Aunt Marlene offered a quiet nod, though Alvarez could not see it. "Thank you, trooper." Alvarez tipped her hat, stepped back, and drove off, leaving the lane wrapped in quiet mist once again. Inside, Maya released a breath she had held too long. Aunt Marlene locked the deadbolt with a firm twist, then the chain. Her hands trembled for the first time that night. Narrator rose into the silence like a shadow leaning close. If the deputy had stepped through that door, Maya would have been taken, and once taken she would not return. And if Maya was taken, the story would change instantly. Cole and his crew would not be rescuers. They would be kidnappers in the morning news. Reed would win without firing a shot. The room dimmed under the weight of those words. Maya rose slowly. and walked down the hallway to the small bedroom Aunt Marlene had prepared. The blankets were warm. The night lamp cast a soft glow across the quilt, but she did not lie down yet. She sat on the edge of the bed, picked up a small scrap of paper, and held it between her fingers. Her breath shook as she wrote in slow, determined strokes, "Do not go back." She folded the note carefully and slid it under her pillow, pressing it flat with her palm like sealing a promise into fabric. Miguel wandered in and curled beside the bed, a silent guardian. Aunt Marlene returned to the door, checked the chain, then pressed her weight into the deadbolt and turned it hard. Click. She waited a heartbeat. Click. 2 clicks, her voice soft as a blessing. Maya closed her eyes at last, and outside the quiet waited like a held breath, knowing the next storm was already on its way. The hearing room hummed with the flat, electric drone of old fluorescent bulbs, casting a pale glow that washed color from every face. The air tasted of dust paper and cold metal. Rows of silent chairs lined the back wall behind a wooden rail, meant to divide watchers from the workings of law. Judge Mahoney sat above the bench, a figure carved from long years of quiet war. Her eyes steady, her posture unmoving. Her gavel rested before her like a sleeping hammer waiting for its moment. Chains stood at the table, to the left sleeves, rolled with the grace of a man ready for deliberate battle. The Attorney General stood beside him calm and focused, a man who spoke softly, only when he intended the world to listen. Across the aisle, Reed sat with his lawyer. Reed wore a modest gray coat, meant to look humble, but his fingers twitched against the table, and his gaze slid across the room in small, panicked cuts. Judge Mahoney lifted her chin. "We begin." The clerk stepped forward and placed a stack of documents onto the table before the Attorney General, who rose with a measured breath. "The state presents evidence recovered from the orchard property, from the Pine Corridor van, and from multiple emergency orders enacted for the protection of minors involved in this case." Reed lawyer rose sharply, smoothing his coat. "Your Honor, these items were gathered by unauthorized civilians and must be excluded from the record." Chains did not answer at once. He let the objection hang in the cold air. Then he stepped forward with a small folder held lightly in one hand. "With respect, the defense misunderstands," he said. "Every item was documented under emergency authorization overseen by Twin Mesa District. All handling is logged in a sealed chain of custody without a single gap." Judge Mahoney's eyes narrowed with interest. "Show me." Rook and Tiny entered from the side door, carrying sealed boxes. Their boots beat a slow, heavy rhythm across the floor. Rook placed the first box on the table, revealing the dash module wrapped cleanly in its protective shell. Tiny set the prayer box beside it, locked in transparent plastic that made its carved wood look like trapped bone. A ripple of unease moved through Reed posture. Chains spoke steadily. "This module contains time-stamped data tracking routes of the orchard van. The extraction was supervised, verified, and filed under emergency order." Reed lawyer stepped forward again, voice tight with strain. "Your Honor, private individuals cannot hold evidence. This violates process. This material is contaminated." Chains lifted another sheet, the first link in a clean chain. "Here is the record of every hand that touched these items," he said. "Signed, logged, verified. Something most official agencies fail to maintain this cleanly." Judge Mahoney's brows tightened as she examined the signatures, the times, the seals, the notations, each page a perfect, unbroken thread. "Continue." Tiny opened the second box. The prayer box rested inside, perfectly still. Even in thick plastic, It carried a dark gravity. Chains rested his fingertips on the sealed case. Recovered under emergency warrant, he said. Its interior contains written threats, messages of coercion, and forced compliance. Handwriting analysis confirms alignment with samples connected to the defendant. Reed lawyer snap. Unfounded hearsay. The Attorney General stepped forward, laying a thin sheet with 2 official seals before the bench. Not hearsay, he said. 2 independent analysts confirmed the match, and the recovered children described these same phrases, word for word. A murmur broke through the gallery like a tremor. Judge Mahoney leaned back. Proceed. Chains slid a transcript onto the bench. The first line lay sharp in the cold light. Obedience is earned through silence. Silence is earned through fear. Fear is a lesson you will learn. A low gasp moved across the room. Reed's voice finally cracked. This is not real. This is an attack orchestrated by criminals and liars. Judge Mahoney's gaze cut through him like glass. Sit. Reed fell silent. The Attorney General lifted a final folder with deliberate calm. Your Honor, the state submits the combined testimony of the minors recovered from the van. Their accounts align with the evidence. Their timelines align with the data. Their fear aligns with every mark in this file. Judge Mahoney lowered her eyes to the folder. Then she looked up and spoke in a voice that allowed no argument. The chain of custody is intact. The evidence is admissible. The testimony stands. Reed lawyer sagged in his chair. Judge Mahoney nodded to the Attorney General. Read the charges. He opened the final sheet. His voice cut the room into pieces with each word. Unlawful restraint, endangerment of minors, coercion through spiritual authority, tampering with emergency communication, transport of minors under threat, conspiracy to obstruct lawful process, possession of instruments used in forced confinement. Each charge fell like a hammer blow without pause. Judge Mahoney lifted her gavel. Probable cause is confirmed on all counts. She struck the bench once, a sharp, cold sound that rolled through the room. The warrant for arrest is hereby issued. Reed exhaled a shaking breath, the practiced smile on his face, cracking like thin glass under heat. His fingers trembled against the edge of the table as 2 officers stepped forward, their shadows long across the floor. Judge Mahoney set down her gavel and looked straight at him. This proceeding is not finished. The courtroom held its breath. It was not done yet. Now came the handcuffs. The courthouse steps shone with thin morning rain like silver veins running through worn stone. Reporters pressed against metal rails, waving microphones that trembled in impatient hands. The air was thick with voices, shouts, whispers, the restless throb of a town torn in half. The doors opened. 2 deputies stepped out, guiding Reed between them. His wrists were bound behind his back, held by hard, cold steel. His coat hung in perfect folds, but his shoulders betrayed the tremor underneath. Reed walked slowly, as though the very ground might tilt and swallow him. The crowd erupted. You hurt those kids. You framed it all. He is innocent. Bring back the lamb. Signs shook in the air. Cameras flashed. The noise surged like a storm tide, crashing in every direction at once. Cole stood in the shadow of an old oak at the far edge of the square, arms loose at his sides, eyes calm and cold. Rook and Tiny stayed close, scanning every movement. Bull stood like a barrier, carved from stone, watching the chaos without blinking. Chains waited behind them, reading the moment the way a soldier reads a battlefield. Reed lifted his chin, straining to assemble a smile. But the mask was cracked. His breath shook. His eyes darted from officer to crowd to the edges of the square where the bikers stood silent and unmovable. Then he saw Cole, and the darkness in Reed's eyes sharpened into something venomous. Cole did not flinch. He stood still as the rain itself, Reed lawyer whispered frantic warnings, but Reed turned his head toward the crowd instead, toward the faces painted with fury and devotion. And then Reed did something that froze cold breath in his chest. Reed nodded. Just once. A small, controlled nod. A signal from a man who wished to look like a martyr. A general giving silent orders. Even as the chains cut into his wrists, the crowd shuddered. A few faces lit with fierce purpose, others tightened with confusion or dread. But the nod had landed. The seed had been planted. The deputies urged Reed forward. At the foot of the steps, a table waited with evidence laid out beneath plastic covers. The prayer box rested at the center. When the Attorney General removed the lid, a cold hush rolled across the crowd. Inside were folded slips of paper written in cramped lines by frightened hands. The Attorney General lifted one carefully. "Make him stop, I cannot breathe." The words floated through the air like ghosts finally given voices. Silence settled heavy and suffocating. Even the reporters lowered their microphones. Reed stumbled as he reached the transport van. For a moment, the strength left his knees. But when he turned back to the crowd, his eyes gleamed with something cruel and triumphant. He forced his face into a serene mask, the kind that had fooled this town for years, and gave one more quiet, approving nod. Chains stepped onto the bottom stair a few feet from Cole. Reed eyes flicked toward him, hate searing through the damp morning air. Chains spoke softly just for Reed. "This is the end of your lies." Reed lips curved into the faintest smile. The deputies pushed him inside the van. The metal doors closed with a deep, ringing thud that echoed across the courtyard like a verdict hammered into stone. The engine rumbled. The van rolled forward. Some in the crowd bowed their heads in grief. Others lifted their voices in rage. But many turned slowly toward a single direction, toward the narrow road leading out of town, winding toward a quiet porch light at Cedar Grove. Chains joined Cole at the base of the steps, his voice low. "He is gone, but his shadow is not." Cole nodded eyes, tracking the direction of the shifting crowd. "The danger is not the man now," he said. "It is those who believed him." Bull cracked his knuckles with a slow, thunderous sound. "Then we hold the line." Tiny glanced at the faces turning toward the road, the anger hardening the whispers, rising like sparks in dry brush. "We need to move," he said. "They are looking for someone to blame." Rook closed his eyes briefly and exhaled. "They will go after the easiest door." Cole took one step away from the courthouse, his boots splashing through a shallow rain puddle. "Maya." Chain's eyes darkened with understanding. "Cedar Grove is no longer safe." Cole looked across the square where the last of the crowd drifted like a restless tide shifting its target. The van was gone, but the danger remained, and it was walking straight toward the only door that had kept a child alive. Cole clenched his jaw. "Then we get there first." He turned toward the bikes, toward the truck, toward the dark road stretching ahead. The war on paper was won. But the real war had just begun. The road into Cedar Grove still held the chill of dawn. As Cole and his crew rolled through the thinning mist, the storm had passed, but the world wore its memory in dark branches, heavy with water, and in the trembling hush that follows fear. When they reached the small lane that wound toward the porch light of the safe house, they saw the remnants of fury gathered near the mailbox. A cluster of followers stood clutching signs now damp, and sagging, their anger leaking into the ground like rainwater. Trooper Alvarez stepped from her cruiser before Cole even cut the engine. Her boots pressed into the gravel, her stance steady as bedrock. She lifted one hand, a gesture of authority without threat. "Disperse. Walk away." Rook and Tiny moved to her sides, forming a living wall. Bull advanced a step further, arms crossed broad shoulders, filling the narrow space of the lane. None of them raised their voices. They did not need to. The followers faltered. Loyalty wavered when met with calm resolve. One by one the signs lowered. One by one the bodies turned. The small crowd dissolved into the trees until the only sound left was the whisper of wind brushing against wet leaves. Aunt Marlene opened the door a sliver. Maya peeked from behind, her eyes bright with worry, until she saw who had come. Relief washed across her face, so soft it almost looked like light. Cole stepped forward and nodded to her. "You are safe now." The house breathed again. A quiet peace returned to the small rooms, and the trembling settled in Maya's hands. Time moved forward in gentle steps, like a season learning how to change. The long summer faded, leaves brown, court filings shifted through calendars. And at last the final judgment was spoken in a voice steady and unshakable. Reed received a sentence of 24 years. Chains delivered the news in his office with the calm strength of someone who had fought many wars without ever lifting a fist. Bull exhaled as if letting go of stones he had carried too long. Tiny leaned against the wall and closed his eyes in quiet gratitude. Rook bowed his head with a soft, unspoken prayer for all the voices that had been trapped inside the prayer box. Cole accepted the ruling with no celebration, only truth. Justice does not shout. In Cedar Grove, the world began to heal. School buses rolled through morning light. Dogs slept on porches warmed by autumn sun. Inside one quiet classroom, Maya sat beside a window, her notebook open, her pencil tracing the start of a new story. Aunt Marlene brought lunch on Fridays, a small ritual tied with cloth and love. Her teacher kept a gentle eye on Maya, offering warmth without intrusion. On the corner of her desk sat the small clay bird, its wings uneven, its tail slightly chipped, its surface rough, where anxious fingers had shaped it. Yet it stood firm on its crooked feet, balanced and whole in its own way. Aunt Marlene called it the brave bird. Maya simply called it hers. When late autumn softened into early dusk, Cole and his crew returned one last time to the small porch of the safe house. Rook carried a small box of tools, leaving behind new hinges and locks as gifts. Bull scratched Miguel behind the ears. Tiny leaned against the railing, scanning the tree line for danger that no longer stalked the shadows. Chains handed Aunt Marlene a slim binder, filled with contacts, names, and quiet promises. "Help is not gone," he said. "It only steps back when the danger does." Maya stepped to the doorway, holding the clay bird against her chest. She stood straighter now, her eyes steady, the strength in her small shoulders no longer shaking. Cole looked at her and nodded once. "Time to lock your door, kid." Maya turned to the deadbolt and placed her hand on it. She drew a breath, let it settle, and then turned the bolt. Click. She paused, grounding herself in the echo, letting safety fill her lungs. Then she turned it the rest of the way. Click. 2 clicks. The ritual complete. The meaning unmistakable. Not fear, not hiding. Choice. Control. Freedom. Aunt Marlene smiled with trembling pride. The crew stood in reverent silence as if witnessing a sunrise. Maya pressed her palm to the door, the clay bird tucked close. "Thank you for saving me." Cole touched the other side of the wood. "You saved yourself." Then the crew turned and walked toward their bikes and truck. Shadows stretched long across the lane as the engines rumbled awake, deep and low like distant thunder rolling over open land. Maya watched from the window, her breath fogging the glass. The clay bird held steady in her hands. The engines grew softer as the crew rode down the lane toward the long road waiting beyond the trees. The engines faded into the distance, but the lock held firm. 2 clicks, and then silence. In the end, Maya's story reminds us of a truth many adults learn too late in life. Silence may keep the peace for a moment, but it never keeps us safe. When we live under the weight of someone else's control, whether it's a person, a belief, or a fear, our world shrinks. And when we finally choose to speak, to step out, to ask for help, that first step can feel like walking through fire. But as the old saying goes, real gold does not fear the furnace. Strength is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move anyway. This story also asks us to look deeper at the labels we place on people. The world is rarely as simple as good on one side and bad on the other. Sometimes the ones who look polished are hiding the darkest truths, and the ones who look rough around the edges carry the gentlest hearts. Life has a way of revealing character over time. Another reminder of that American proverb our grandparents used to say, "You learn the real measure of a person over the long haul." Most of all, Maya's journey is a quiet invitation to all of us. Reclaim your voice, set your boundary, turn the lock, literally or figuratively, and say, "This is my life, and I get to choose who enters it." Two small clicks, a simple gesture, but a powerful symbol of dignity and self-worth. If this story spoke to you, I'd love to hear your thought. Share your reflections. Or if you feel comfortable, a time when you found the courage to stand up for yourself, like the video if it moved you. And subscribe for more stories that blend tension, heart, and real-world insight. Wishing you peace, strength, and a steady light to guide you through every storm.